Discussion topic today is social activism in film. And at ReFrame, we really try to bring films that are very socially conscious and are able to inform and advocate and challenge us to Peterborough. So I feel like this panel is really emblematic of what this festival is about. I'll introduce myself first. My name is Aisha Jamal. I'm a part-time local. I teach at Trent University in the Modern Languages Department. I'm also a filmmaker, and my film is playing tonight at 7:30 at Market Hall. Thought I'd like that. And I'd like to introduce our panel today. We'll start with Clarke Mackey at the end. And Clarke wears many hats. He's a writer, producer, director, editor, and university teacher or professor at Queen's University in film. He's worked on over 50 productions, so way too many to name, but a part of me was really excited to read that you had worked on Degrassi Junior High.
That's right.
That's right, as a director. But he's here today to discuss his film, Till the Cows Come Home. And that's a film about the closure of Canadian farm prisons, and I think especially the prison farms in Kingston, the Frontenac prison farm. His film is playing today at 5 o'clock at Showplace. And next to him is Joan Sullivan, and Joan has spent the first half of her life working in Africa on HIV and AIDS, and she's now back in Canada living in the Maritimes, right?
Eastern Quebec.
Eastern Quebec. And she's focusing now on her photographic work on climate change. And we have Sean Sullivan next, Sean Liliani, I think, behind you too. And Sean's a trained journalist. He spent a few years traveling around the world making radio documentaries and also short films. He's now working as a videographer for the Globe and Mail. He's here with his film Powers of Towers. And it's a film about two urban activists, an Arab Canadian and also a urban planner who are working on urban revival in Thorncliffe. So I thought I'd start by asking a few questions, then opening it up to the audience and see if there are any questions or discussion points. I thought a good place to start would perhaps to talk about what really drew each one of you to the topics that you deal with in your films. So for Clarke, that would be the penal system and the closure of prison farms. For Joan, that would be climate change, and for Sean, immigrant communities and urban renewal. So actually, we don't have a mic, so please go for it, Clarke.
Okay, so they were going to close the, there had been a prison farm in Kingston. There's 6 prisons in the Kingston area. There were actually 2 prison farms in the Kingston area that had been in operation for over 100 years, feeding the prisoners and in fact supplying milk and eggs to several other prisons. And also helping to rehabilitate the prisoners. And then just all of a sudden, the Conservative government, through the Corrections Service, decided to close that down, the farm down forever, and sell the operation. And we can talk about why that was. But at any rate, what interested me was the way that the people in Kingston, hundreds and hundreds of people in Kingston, felt that this was unjust. People, whole wide range, from the anarchists, the hardline radicals on the one side, the nuns, the prison justice people, the farmers. It was one of those things where there were so many people, and I thought, this is really an amazing thing that all of these people from diverse backgrounds are getting together and actually are willing to break the law and sit on the road and stop the cattle trucks from coming in. To me, so my interest in it was about civil disobedience, I guess.
Joan, speak better. My film, the film that I worked on with Susan Woodfine, the director, she's unfortunately not able to come, but we both live in Quebec, and those who were not able to see the film, it's worth mentioning that my life has been just a bunch of S-curves. I've worked on HIV in Africa. I now am a organic garlic farmer in rural Quebec. I'm a still photographer, and I just made my first film. And the film started out immediately following our own version of Hurricane Sandy in the Gaspé region on the shores of the St. Lawrence. There was huge flooding and erosion, and people lost businesses and homes and roads and railroads, and it was very dramatic. And I was attracted to it from a still photographer point of view. But my friend, Susan, who had just recently been laid off but because of budget cuts at the CBC, she was looking for something to do. So we first thought we would do a book about this weather event. And as we started, she was writing, I was making photographs. The idea of a film slowly came, and we had no experience, so it was hard to get money. But with $25,000, you can make a film, a documentary film. It is possible. It was 2 years of our life without a salary, basically, as I'm sure you will understand. But the issue, the essence of the film is walking the talk. You can talk as much as you want about AIDS or climate change or politics as you want, but until you change your own life and can act as a role model for others to help them visualize what it might be to change their life too in ways that would be helpful to the climate and the environment, nothing is going to change. It's our consuming lifestyles which is at the crux. So the film never set out to be a film about me as I transitioned from my bureaucratic United Nations international consulting life to being an organic farmer. Finally, she turned the camera on me, which was never the plan. But when you're making your own film, you're not reporting to anybody. So we turned the camera on me and used my life as the subject. And if anyone had told me 2 years ago that I would be the main character of the film, I would have said impossible. But in fact, we recognize that you have to make it personal. You have to help people, have to be able to resonate. The film has to resonate with the audience if you want to change apathy into action.
And Sean?
I guess for me, the project didn't start with an issue that we had and thought that we wanted to make a movie to tell the story. It was a collaboration, Space and Magazine. We didn't know what we wanted to do, and then it kind of just came up through wanting to do something with them. That they were doing a profile on these two urban activists who were winning the Jane Jacobs Prize that year, and it ended up being more of an exploration of the issue where I didn't have any opinions going into it at the beginning. A short summary, it's about a lot of these old modernist concrete tower neighborhoods in Toronto that are seen as dilapidated eyesores nowadays. So Thorncliffe, Flemington Park, St. Jamestown, the High Park apartment towers. And growing up in Toronto too, that was kind of the attitude that I had towards them. But to meet these two people who had the ability to see something else there and the potential to change them for the better, and actually did do that. It was interesting how, I said this last night at Q&A too, that was a surprise for me, that being around them and documenting it totally changed my own perspective. So, and I was happy to share that paradigm shift in the short too.
Yeah. I think one of the impressive things about your films, Clarke and Sean, is the fact that it reflects really the collaborative spirit of what you're really trying to capture, because Clarke, your film credits something like 4 or 5 directors, and Sean actually credits Sarah Martin, your co-director, as well. So I was just wondering, how do you work in that sort of collaborative process of the director?
Well, in our case, it was an unusual situation because it was the project. The original filming was done by a former student of mine who kept touch with Lenny Epstein. He's credited as the director of the film, and so he shot all the footage of the actual events that took place in 2010. He's here actually too. And then Lenny had this material and he was trying to figure out what to do with it. And that's when Jamie Swift, Elaine Foreman, and I got involved. So it became the four of us working together, starting out with Lenny's footage, and then adding some more footage to it, and some archival material, things like that. But yeah, it was a really collaborative. 4 of us were working quite closely together, and certainly, arguing with each other, and and that's why it took a little bit longer to finish than it might otherwise, because there was a lot of democratic process involved. Right?
Yeah, Sean, how does that for you?
I think I've come at a lot of projects from, let's say, less structured financing. So a lot of the time it's just, we have cameras and we go and try to do something, and then if we can sell it after or get it published somewhere after, we do. So I've always struggled with even adding credits at the end, and to me they've always seemed kind of made up, because we didn't have to fulfill these roles on any grant application. We only had to think about them at the end of the project when we're like, all right, what are you, and we'll just make something up, like a supervising producer. But what does that mean? I don't know. So, I don't know, I've collaborated with Sarah on a number of projects, and I think both of us will just get obsessed about different things, so it kind of works well in that way if she wants to be following one of the characters and calling them every day. And this project, for me, there was a time where I was really just obsessed with capturing kind of that cityscape, so a lot of those opening shots with the sunrise in Thorncliffe. I was getting up, I think that was probably this time last winter, so whenever sunrise is this time of year, I was driving out there at 6 a.m. and just standing out there in the cold.
Right, so you're really dividing up the roles here.
Yeah.
Now, what are some of the advantages of actually using film or photography as a tool of social activism?
Humans are hardwired for storytelling. I mean, I think since the dawn of civilization, we tell stories, we left images on rocks. I think cinema is probably, especially in this day and age, digital. My daughter's generation is very visual. There's no question that it is an important tool, but I don't think it's the only tool. I don't think that, one film an activist makes. It's got to be part of a much larger conversation. If we had, I'm dating myself here, but some of the great music of the 60s and 70s, in the background, and then you've got great radio docs, and then film and poetry. I think it's all together. It's not just cinema as the best solution for getting people, in my case, not just interested in climate change. So it's kind of a vague answer.
Yeah.
Can I
of course.
Add to that. So this is my sort of particular journey that I've gone on over the years, is because I did work in the sort of the mainstream industry. I was directing television shows and working with TVO and all of that sort of stuff. But my thinking at this, I've moved really, really away from that and thinking that if you actually want to use movies in an activist way, again, in our case, our movie, people were sort of saying, well, why don't you, why doesn't it get shown on television, right? Or why doesn't it, be shown in movie theaters? Or why don't you sell DVDs of your movie so that people can? And what I'm thinking is that in many cases, those kinds of consumer structures where you are basically, consuming a movie, why do people watch television? They watch television to go to sleep, right? Or because they're doing the dishes and they just want to sort of look at it. Like it's not the place to actually raise consciousness, right? And the same even with DVDs. You watch at home, you probably you're only half paying attention to it or whatever. So I guess when I'm thinking about activist cinema or using cinema to change people's consciousness and make people think about things and act upon things, it needs to be you have to really think about the context in which those things are being shown. Where is that movie being shown, in what way? And that's where I think you really draw on the idea that people are together in a room, like we are right now. We're alive in a room together here. We watch the movie, but we also talk to each other about the issues that the movie raises. So you can't do that if you're watching it at home on TVO necessarily. You could, I guess, or if you had a DVD of it. So, but it seems to me that we need to get together in real life, face to face, and the movie has to be part of that. experience has to be, it has to be in that context rather than sort of being a consumer object.
Sean, did you want to say it?
I guess I could add kind of, maybe based on my experiences doing a lot of stuff for a digital audience online. I'm usually kind of fighting against cat videos and clickbait because that's what people generally want to publish because it gets the most hits. And I'm sure kind of distribution and metrics have always been an issue that you have to kind of fight against. Your success is measured against how many theaters it's playing in, or how many blockbusters or DVDs and stuff like that. But now with the internet kind of being able to measure things on a more granular level and see literally play that something gets. I see that as the new battle, and that's why I'm kind of drawn to doing portraiture and just trying to tell individual stories, how people are affected by certain issues. And so I don't know, I had one experience where I did a short episode on these guys in Toronto who founded the tool library, and just through the feedback that we were getting after it was released, heard that someone in another city saw it and like, oh, that looks really easy to do, now I'm like, I want to do that too. So to me, the fact that it resonated with that one person to that extent means more than however many thousands of views a cat video is getting,
Yeah. I think, Clarke, you were talking about the impact of social activism, but with films, how do you actually measure a kind of impact or success?
Well, I don't think you can't measure it. Right? I mean, it's not, and one movie seldom does very much. It is, I think, your point is that it has to be part of a larger thing. I mean, it's to some extent, for me, it's just anecdotal when people come up afterwards, or you see the light go on in people's eyes.
Right.
Sometimes, if you're there to actually see that thing.
Right.
But
I would like to add to that, and carry on that thought just a little bit more. I think sometimes it's almost better that the film or the story in the film is not so dead obvious, that it's much more at a lower level, that works on your audience for weeks and months later. Then, if we could measure how, in the subconscious, that person all of a sudden has reevaluated their own worldview or their own consuming behavior and changed because of our film, if we could measure that, then we would be successful.
Right.
But I just think it's time. It's a slow moving boat, but we are moving forward. Can't measure it.
I think you had some thoughts about how to even think about measuring impact.
Well, I don't know, just being here was a different experience for me. As if anyone was at the screening last night, I had no idea there were going to be that many people. So that was great, and to actually be able to talk to people after a screening says a lot more than looking at the counts go up online.
Right.
And then you can actually kind of push it to a further conversation too, right? A lot of people came up to us after who either knew people who lived in Thorncliffe or lived around Thorncliffe, and then could tell us about other neighborhoods that they thought we should profile too. So that's kind of how you can find out about your next story potentially.
Now I'd like to open it up to the audience. If anyone here has questions or comments, please feel free. Yeah.
It's really hard to get funding for any kind of a project if you can't measure your results. Right? Then you're up against commercial measures that are quantifiable. So are you expecting to make a living? Do people make a living from doing films about activism?
That's a very good
Or
question.
is this a labor of love?
okay, I'll just it's so. I wasn't at Hot Docs last year, but I was at Hot Docs a couple of years ago, and I got the industry pass. This is a short. I won't make this story too long. And all these people who were my age, with the gray hair and everything, they were sitting around crying in what I call crying in their beer. It's saying it's all over with. The sky is falling, right? That basically the TV doesn't care about documentaries anymore. There's no money for documentaries. We're going to have to go and start selling real estate or something like that, because you're not going to be able to make a living doing this anymore, because everything's changing. YouTube, all this stuff. And then I went to another workshop with people who were 20 years or 30 years younger than I am, and they were all, oh, okay, it's guerrilla, it's it's just get out there, and it's crowdfunding, and it's but it's basically the labor of love argument, right? So in this particular, so I don't know what the answer is. Are we going to be able to make a living doing this in the future? I'm not so sure. In the case of our project, which was made for about the same kind of money that your project was made for, we actually did crowdfunding, but we did it very, very old-fashioned. We're very, very old-fashioned. So we actually sent out letters in envelopes with stamps on them, right? And they went to people's houses, and people opened them up, and they read them, and they gave us a check for $200 or $150, and they put it in another envelope and put a stamp on it and mailed it back to us. Right? So we actually funded the film entirely. Jamie was in charge of that and did a very, very, very fine job of raising thousands of dollars from small donors in the form of checks. But it didn't pay us, right? It paid for the actual physical process of making the movie. But so we all have day jobs. So it wasn't very good. I don't know. I teach people who want to get jobs in the film industry. That's what I do for a living, and I worry about them. So I worry how are they going to make ends meet? I'm not entirely sure about that these days. So I don't know.
I think I just lived through what you just described. So yeah, I have two other jobs, not just one. I'm a farmer and I'm a still photographer. So. But I'm raising a daughter. There she is, right there. She's, open to moving into this industry.
Is she? Wow.
Yeah. So, there's hope. There's hope.
Okay.
Actually, Sean, maybe you should speak to that, because you are making a living of freelancing and contract work, and you're basically full-time filmmaker.
Well,
that was a telling word.
No, don't be
I guess how I've tried to do it, and for me, I guess the projects that I would, submit to festivals are only ever labors of love. Like we had no funding for this, we just did it. So I guess we just had to invest it. If you're going to measure where the funding's coming from, just the fact that we'd invested ourselves buying equipment for years, and then we're able to do something completely independently. But I guess how I balance work and life, and why I would react to being called a full-time filmmaker like that, is because while I was working for a Canadian news website, it was startups. It was a small company, but we were just doing Canadian political news, and then eventually the business model shifted to doing corporate video. And when all of the clients became HSBC and RBC, it was nice for a little bit of time, because they would send us, to Hong Kong to go shoot a profile of some banker in Hong Kong, and you get a free vacation. But I realized at one point, when they sent me to Bali for a week, and I came back, and I was like, I hate my job. It's time to move on to something else. So now I try to balance it with doing some commercial work, but for clients that I can choose and want to work with. So I do a lot of work for the City of Toronto. Sarah and I shot all these Louis Blanche profiles of artists, and so that stuff will pay a lot more than the things we do for free. But at the end of the day, it's still work you're doing for a client. So you have to step back and let go of some of the creative control, because at the end of the day, you're not the director. You're just doing it for somebody. But I've kind of found a good balance with that kind of work and the short films.
There's a question up here.
I'm very fascinated to ask you about the difference between filming the passion that you have for your individual themes and actually the storyline or the narrative as it unfolded before you, including political endpoints. But that compared to actual inclusion of process for a sort of an activist outcome, like moving from passion to action. Do you pull your viewer through certain ways that different stakeholders come into it, with the end point that a person leaves the film, having some appreciation of process, next steps, stakeholders, and political outcomes or policy outcomes. I teach passion to action in high school, and the kids are always filled with passion,
Right.
but then trying to contain it and then understand a bit of the process for coming out as an effective activist. So I'm just wondering how you balance the theme and the subject and the depth with, here's how you can mature through the theme and come out as an effective activist for impact.
I think that's a really good question. Jamie's nodding.
A minute and 18 seconds.
I don't know whether we've been particularly good at that, to be honest with you. I mean, we've made something that hopefully will raise a lot of questions for people. But there are a number of issues with that. One is that we don't want to just preach to the choir. Although the choir needs to be preached to. I'm not opposed to preaching to the choir, but I don't think that our movie does a lot in terms of the movie itself in actually pointing people towards something that they can do about it. Right? The way that we're dealing with it is by always trying as much as possible to always have a speaker with the film whenever it's shown, so that there can be a Q&A afterwards, so that there can be a 2015 person in the room who can say, well, this is what's happening now, and this is what you could do, and talk in those ways. And we have a study guide that goes with the film that helps the speaker to manage that kind of structure, but it's very context specific.
So you work on channels of distribution and speakers' guidebooks, that's an appendum.
Yeah. So for us, the live part of the screening is as important as the film itself.
As was previously mentioned, labor of love, not much money, having to take another job on, just to put food on the table. I think it has to start with passion. If it didn't, you wouldn't make the effort. And that was my case. I went to graduate school and focused on what I thought at the time was the biggest challenge facing humanity, which was AIDS. And I did that for 20 years. And then I recognized that there's a higher calling, which is climate change. And I saw it in Africa, and it became a passion. I never ever thought, I'm going to become a filmmaker and make an activist film. But the passion kept driving me. The dreaming, the following my heart. And the money followed. I had $25,000 to make this little film. I'm very proud of it, but the whole process, and I'm only a one filmmaker person here, you should speak to them as well. The whole process kept changing. The whole process, what we started out making and what we ended up getting was completely different products. And we learned and we incorporated new points of view in the film, and I became more informed through the process. But the passion was driving it all along. I'm not totally sure I answered your question, but that's where I started from.
I was just thinking that I'm working on something right now that has some similar themes to my short that's here, which is kind of about someone coming up against bureaucracy at City Hall that's preventing them from doing what they want to do. So I think just this medium allows you to kind of dive deeper into someone's own narrative and struggles, and I think through that there can be an educational takeaway where someone sees how someone overcame something like that. And as I also mentioned in the Q&A last night, through filming this project, we realized that the way that Sabina was able to start the market in Thorncliffe, which was originally illegal and she couldn't get any permits for, they did the first one when the city was on strike. So there was no one to come and enforce those bylaws, and thousands of people came out, and then once they had that momentum, it never stopped. So that was a good teachable moment. So I just try to find examples of people overcoming those things, and then you hope that an audience can take something away from it.
So the lesson there, I mean, is that it's a film that talks about how terrible everything is. Is it necessarily as effective as a film where you see adversity, but you also see that there's an optimistic thread. I think that's
Yeah.
Any other questions? And I think when it comes to sort of social activist films, it's really important to get the information right, and a couple of you were sort of touching on that. So at what steps, at what point in the process of making a film do you do research? Is that something you do before, during, after? Because there's a lot of information in your film, and also in yours, where you quote from Jane Jacob. So where does that come in the filmmaking process?
all through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you do.
Yeah, I mean, and in many cases, things are changing and more information is coming out, even after even after you've frozen the film, the editing, and you're ready to go into post-production, all of a sudden there's some new development. Do you include?
Do you try to include that or not? Because yesterday I spoke to a filmmaker who says that he, the filmmaker who made Marinoni actually said that he opened his film up, I think about a week ago, just to add another title at the end. And I was like, wow, as a filmmaker, I would never be able to actually, open up that whole project and keep adding information. Do you do that?
I don't, but I have things I want to go back and change because I don't think they're right anymore.
See, I mean, it's interesting because I would say the same answer. I don't really, but I think there's no reason why we shouldn't really, because given the technology that we have, there's no reason why the work has to be fixed.
Right.
It seems to me that there could be multiple iterations of it depending on how things unfold. Right?
Maybe that would be the role of multi-platform. You have your original product, but you can still spin off without changing necessarily the original.
Please go quick.
Oh, well, spinning off some comment on multi-platform, how does film interact with the Arab Spring, social media, and all of that, and YouTube? So how do all of those platforms intersect, and can you open up your platform and have that kind of explosion of distribution channels or interactive channels? Or is that not what you're after?
I haven't done it yet, but I do think that that's going to become more and more common in the future. For example, in my little film, we interviewed so many people that only about less than half of the people we interviewed got into the film. So we have this idea that, okay, we have our 51-minute film, but on other platforms, whether it's our blog or creating, Twitter accounts for these other characters who still had something very valuable to say. We haven't done it yet. I don't have the money yet to invest, but I'm sure that there are other better examples that you are aware of. But it has to probably be that way to satisfy the short attention span of the next generation. I'm not sure they all have 55 minutes to sit down and watch a whole film, but they can watch a 2-minute profile or a quiz or a treasure hunt or something to find other information.
I'm going to be the spoiler here. I'll let you finish. I'm going to let you finish.
Okay.
But I'm going to be the spoiler here because I actually was an early adopter of interactive. I made an interactive documentary in 1997 when it was the technology was really existent, and I was. I'm not speaking loudly enough. Okay, back in 1997, I made an interactive documentary on the web, and it was very technically glitchy and all that sort of stuff. But I become quite cynical about interactive documentary filmmaking, and this was confirmed because I talked to a friend of mine who's just finished an interactive documentary recently, and his statistics are the same as my statistics, which is that people go in and most people who go into the documentary only watch the introduction, which is a couple of minutes, and then they leave. And the next level down is people who interact for an average of 12 minutes and then leave. So and all of these little this friend of mine made a documentary where there were lots of little beautiful, really interesting little side stories and portraits of individuals and stuff like that you could go to outside of the main thread. And he said, except for his close friends, nobody ever connected with us. In other words, my feeling is that there is an antipathy between long form, what I call long form storytelling, and social media. I mean, I think social media is all about very, very short, extremely short. Like you talk about, the Globe and Mail wants you to make films that are 1 minute long, right? 2 minutes. Or 2 minutes long, right? And maybe they're right. I mean, maybe, you know, given how the whole thing works out, or 3 minutes or something, because it's, but I'm old-fashioned. I want people to sit in the dark for a certain period of time and become engaged over a long period of time. I know. I tell my students this, you know, just whatever. So I don't know. So I'm throwing water. I'm a skeptic when it comes to interactive video making.
I think I'm a naive optimist in the sense that I don't think you should follow the clicks that you're getting necessarily, and I think especially now with the opportunities to partner with anyone, to record anything and post it, like this seems to be recorded right now, and you know, maybe someone will email one of us because we said something years from now, who knows, but it's just possible to extend conversations in any way, and even if it's just one person that's watching it, that's one person more than if you were doing it, but I guess I also try to just look at how people's habits are changing also with the way that they consume media. And I think there are bigger, more promising shifts with people going on Netflix, binge watching, and now every other telecommunications company is trying to copy what Netflix is doing. So I think people are now getting in the habit of treating their computers more like they used to television, actually watching full TV shows and full films. And I think once that transformation has become more complete, people have more faith in their ability to reach an online audience, then you'll have so much more stuff online. Like even just the Netflix documentary page, you know, I can see so many more documentaries or even posted on YouTube than I could have years ago. A lot of the time it was just, I tried to see as much as I could at Hot Docs because that was the only place that I could ever see those movies. And then after that they were gone, but not anymore.
There was a question in the back.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask all the panelists, in reference to each of your films, where does the line is drawn between documentary, docudrama, and drama? Where do you fit your projects into those categories?
I don't know. I remember when I was first being kind of trained in a journalism program, I was just disillusioned to see even how fake television news is, and that they'll just ask someone to walk in and out of a building or sit down at their desk like 5 times so they can get the right shot. And I kind of had a moment there when I was like, what? So I don't know. Usually I'll interview somebody and then I get to provide a visual portrait without, I want to ask someone to do something that they wouldn't do. I don't know. I haven't done any kind of hybrid documentary filmmaking, so.
So if you consider a docudrama to be a hybrid? Or I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think, especially some movies in the last couple of years, I think The Imposter was the first one that I saw that I really liked, and would not necessarily consider that a pure documentary because there were reenactments that were so well done that the movie was almost half narrative, right?
Does Michael Moore do documentaries?
Well, that's in a different conversation. I'd say that's not as much done about style as much as it's about to what extent is he editorializing versus pretending to remain different.
Well, when we teach film, I think we also often talk about what are the differences between these different kinds of filmmaking.
Well, I'm just kind of here for the other two panels.
No, yeah.
Where that line is between documentary, docudrama, and drama, where, like you mentioned, I never asked anybody to do anything they didn't want to do.
Maybe Clarke and Joan can speak to their
Yeah,
posts.
I mean, I'll respond. This is something that I talk to my students about quite a bit. Because I think it's wrong, it's probably wrong to even say that there's a line, right? I mean, I think that there's a continuum. And I think that it would be naive to think that even a very, very pure cinema verite, right, if you want to, with all of these terms, right, but that where the pure cinema verite filmmakers of the Americans, like Pennebaker and stuff, they would never do a second take of anything. The majority of documentary filmmakers, including me, do some little bits of reenactment or throw in things that didn't actually happen at the time, but they help to illustrate the thing, and they sort of appear as if they were happening at the time, sort of thing. So that there's a certain amount of manipulation or the adding of material in order to make the thing more interesting. But it's still a documentary. It's still about the truth. It's still about the truth. It's not actually fictionalizing, right?
Right.
But then you've got Michael Moore. Now Michael Moore is, if we were to talk about it in terms of this history of cinema, he's not a documentary filmmaker as much as he creates what's called lived cinema visu, or it's a kind of hybrid form, to use that term, where he goes in and he actually creates events. Like he catalyzes a situation by bringing the cameras in and setting up his people in that particular position and making things happen. So it's not fiction.
Well, in a sense, he is turning the camera on himself.
He's turning the camera on himself and on his, but he's making things happen, right? He's actually, it's like a happening or something, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think that produces some very, very interesting results. It's not the camera is the fly on the wall just watching reality happen, which that's impossible. It's impossible. I mean, it's what you're just pointing the camera at a certain time, turning it on at a certain time, and editing it in a certain way. You're structuring these things. So I think it's just a one continuous, and then drama is at the other end where it's all made up, right? But then there's Selma, for example, which is not made up, but sort of made up, and actors and all that.
Joan, did you want to add to that?
I've only made one film, and we set out to make a documentary, and I can only say that it didn't even come close to the middle one, drama.
Yeah.
But in the editing process, there were moments where we took my still photos and superimposed them on real filmed landscapes to create some sort of subliminal messages that was not real, but certainly didn't fall into the fictional. So I'm less experienced than my two panelists here to respond.
I think we have time for one last question. So up here.
Okay, well, I just want to affirm you as artists, and I believe, I saw South African film yesterday. What a terrible situation. And the artists, the musicians, filmmakers, all colors and genders and statuses, struggling in the arts. And so that's what I want to say. I've been an activist here for 50 years, and I take credit. For example, this event affirms me. So part of your work is affirming the activism. I mean, you're working on neocon criminal justice system, the green revolution, and urban poverty. All of those link. And here's this weekend here in Peterborough. There's a literacy day with 1,000 people just yards away from us.
Really?
Children getting books and doing reading. Every time Peterborough makes a progressive move, and we had a Muslim feminist come close to winning the mayoralty. Yeah. I take credit. That's the way I keep my spirits up. I've been involved in international development and in women's issues. And I hope you take some credit too from affirming the progressive in Canada, giving us joy and new energy. Of course, and Oh, I have a monthly column in the Examiner. Any topic I like.
They pay you?
$25. So I'm paying tribute to you and saying thank you.
Well, let's maybe end on, perhaps you can tell us what are the projects you're working on now?
So I'm working on a very personal documentary, almost an autobiographical documentary about the time when my mother, this was in 1969, when my mother became a radical Maoist for a couple of years. And in fact, 3 members of my family, brother, my sister, and my mother all became Maoist during the height of kind of left activism in Toronto in that period. And there's a lot of archival material. It's really an archival movie. So that's what I'm working on now.
That sounds interesting. Joan?
I've succeeded in making my first film with Susan Woodfine, and I'm taking a break from filmmaking. It was exhausting, labor of love. That is done, but I'm focusing on some simple long-term photo projects right now. There will be another film, but I'm not ready.
I'm working on something that I was editing yesterday. This is what I was talking about. The guy up against the bureaucracy at City Hall. He's actually leaving his full-time job next week as an engineer to become, well, to do what was his side project for the last 3 years. It's called Stopgap, and it's just to make Toronto more accessible. He builds little ramps because a lot of Toronto storefronts, I'm sure you've seen them here too, will just have a 4-inch step which prevents anyone in a wheelchair from being able to access them. So I'm doing a portrait profile of him, which will probably be up on the Globe website next week.
Great. Clarke, Joan, and Sean will be around, so if you have any further comments or questions, grab a coffee and do speak to them. And please join me in thanking them for their time. We have one more panel tomorrow, and it's at 11 a.m. here in the same location. So the topic for tomorrow's discussion is food activism, so please join us. Thanks.